Okay, good afternoon everybody. My name is Ruyter. I'm Dutch, and it's, for most English people it's pretty hard last name to pronounce. I am a professor in marketing. In marketing we have a bit of an ambivalent relationship with creativity. My mother still thinks I do something with advertising, because marketing and advertising, creative ideas, sort of all get mixed together. I am in fact not. One of my research themes is to study how social media, how social business are shaping up basically the business world. And within that context, I decided to embark on a study that took about 4 years, and which I'm going to present in 20 minutes, that looks at the problem of creativity when businesses are moving towards a social business. So what in a nutshell, I'm going to deal with is the phenomenon of crowdsourcing, when a failure to come up with good ideas by a large population of consumers doesn't work, but ultimately does work. And then I'm going to move on to framing creativity at the team level, because we believe that, especially in business, creativity is a phenomenon that probably best becomes most effective when you have a group of people together. So I'm going to briefly present the results of research that we did over the last 4 years. So starting from the fact that our world is changing, and that we're currently living, working, playing in a marketplace where people talk to each other, where it's no longer a business that tells consumers what to do, but where people want to participate. And that's not only in the business world, it also is happening in politics, at the local level, in councils. Participatory citizenship is increasingly becoming popular, and citizens, consumers, want to have a say. So the stereotypical conception of creativity, a source of creativity as a solitary thinker, we believe is slightly being replaced by a group of people, whether they're in a virtual environment or in a real environment, that share ideas, that interact, and that struggle. And we sort of refer to this as social creativity. Now, in a lot of environments online, people have gotten used to it. Starbucks had their logo changed through a crowdsourcing contract. So people are used to being involved in discussions. But it has led to a very complex sourcing landscape. A landscape where creativity is sort of sourced to groups of consumers, or to individual consumers, to teams of employees, and even, as I'll show later, to teams of various companies that get together, suppliers and buyers that get together, and within the supply chain try to come up with novel and innovative ideas. And that's the state of the art of social business. When dealing with problems that are how to involve other people in idea generation, that's a bit of a wicked problem. A problem that becomes more complex the more you think about it. And the whole process of creativity, as we study it, is also a wicked problem. There's always anti-creative forces that work against people when they brainstorm, when they come together in teams, when they try to come up with new solutions. And there is this quote that says, there can be no doubt creativity gets killed a lot. I've done this before. Even within before I came here, I was in a departmental meeting where somebody actually said, this is not going to work. We tried that 10 years ago. And there's all these creativity killers that once you start brainstorming and once you start running into the disengaged employee, creativity gets dampened, gets hindered, gets frustrated. So that makes dealing with creativity in a social context a wicked problem itself, in and of itself. So we started when we started to think about how can you have people collectively come up with ideas, with new logos, with new restaurant formulas, with all sorts of problems. A well-used methodology these days is through the use of crowdsourcing. You organize a context online in Facebook. You ask people to come up with ideas. You judge these ideas, or you have them judged by experts, and then you pick the best idea and Bob's your own. We did that. We studied a Facebook campaign, a crowdsourcing contest in Thailand, where one of the national restaurant chains was looking for a new advertising campaign and wanted to not have this done by creative professionals, but by their customers. So people were invited to come up with creative ideas for this campaign. They were judged by a panel of experts. They did hire experts to judge the ideas. And guess what happened? None of the ideas was actually deemed as implementable or actionable. And that's a sort of a dark side to sourcing creativity to the crowd that occurs quite a lot. It's cheap, it's easy, but it's not always effective. What we did find, though, is that when you ask people to apply their expertise, or when you ask people to deploy their creative skills, they like it. They get value out of participating in a creative process. So the flip side of this is that when we were researching the aftermath of this crowdsourcing campaign, we were finding that social value, epistemic value, so the fact that you're developing, the fact that you're experiencing new things, were important value propositions, and that's a term that's important in marketing, value propositions that matter, that ultimately strengthened loyalty perceptions among these consumers. So the big dilemma is, when you do this, it's not effective from an idea generation type of perspective, but it can be effective in strengthening the bond that customers, that people feel with your company or with your brand. So this is why bad ideas may not always be a bad idea. And this is why ultimately the company kept sourcing creativity to its customers via Facebook. So that's basically creativity that is sourced at the individual level. Moving more upstream, we thought that maybe it's going to be more effective to put this at the level of a team, of a group of people. So we started out by studying this in the supply chain. And we went, when you define the problem that we were addressing in a nutshell, is that, formal processes of organizing, brainstorming, getting people together, getting employees together to come up with innovative solutions do not always work. In fact, most of the time they don't work. And so it's very hard to formalize this as in a rule book or 10 steps, as is often suggested in a number of self-help, managerial guidelines to creativity. There's a lot of managerial literature that have recipes of how to be creative as a team. It usually doesn't work. So we came into this saying, you know, when you want people to be creative, when you want employees to be creative, you need to do this from the bottom up. You know, it's very difficult to organize this and let people work along guidelines, along strict rules and procedures. And what we wanted to see is, you know, what determines whether a team is going to be creative. So basically, we developed a research agenda about 5 years ago, where we predefined 3 projects. First of all, we wanted to see whether it's possible, and it depends on your paradigmatic view, whether it's at all possible to capture this with a measurement instrument, because it's all perceptions. Then we studied teams within organizations, so cross-functional teams that had as their assignment, as a mandate to come up with creative solutions to being more in tune with the market, with the social media regulated market. And then we, in the final stage, studied teams where suppliers and buyers were delivering employees. So teams that truly operate on the boundary between 2 business partners. So we did this with these fairly well-known names. I'm just naming them here. I'm not going to share with you how each and every company did because of confidentiality reasons, but we had a pretty good spread of types of companies in which we studied business-to-business sourcing. So first project aimed at measuring team creativity. Now, when you do this in our area of science, you do what they call a scale development process. Now, this took about a year, where we started with interviews, we generated a pool of items, we tested this, we retested this, we tested this in the fields of these companies, and we came up with an instrument that was reliable and valid to academic criteria, in that it is a good way of monitoring, assessing, and also tracking a climate of creativity within the teams. And a climate is a set of beliefs, but you can also just define this as the way we do things around here. So some of these have to do with psychological safety. It's okay to come up with new things. And some of these have to do with the fact that people have perceptions on whether constructive discussions are going on. But time and again, and in several studies, this 9-item scale proves to be a good way of measuring the degree of creativity within those teams, which is nice. But of course, you wanted to know whether that makes any difference. Whether teams that score high on this scale actually do better. And you probably also want to know what influences whether teams, IT, HR, R&D, marketing, sales, people from various backgrounds were being put together to work on coming up with innovative solutions. And we wanted to know whether team creativity climate makes a difference. And it did. It did in the sense that it ultimately drives coming up with usable, actionable solutions. Like, for instance, designing a package for deodorant that was more environmentally friendly. So it did, unlike the crowdsourcing project, result in in solutions that were measured along these criteria. which then ultimately were measured against bottom line sourcing results. So, you know, where the solutions that were being suggested above average cost reductions. So on the effect side, having a team where there is a sense of creativity does pay off if you want your teams to come up with creative solutions. We also looked at, you know, what drives a climate for creativity, an atmosphere for creativity within these teams. So two things that stood out that were significantly explaining why some teams were high and some teams were low on this variable. Creative skills in combination with task expertise. So it's not just necessary to have creative people. You also need within your team people that know what they're talking about, that bring in expertise from various functional backgrounds. Because we were finding that, you know, as this becomes bigger, as you bring in a diverse range of specializations, team creativity climate gets boosted. So, drives quality solutions. It's not, as we were finding time and time again, so much dependent on the motivation to be creative. And interestingly, leadership was not a driver, but an inhibitor. So the more leaders were present, were running the show in these teams, the less there was opportunity for a climate for creativity to emerge within these groups.
Could you say a bit more about that, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you say a bit more about that?
Yes. Yeah.
That's huge. What sort of leadership are you referring to?
I'm sorry?
What sort of leadership you're referring to?
We were measuring transformative leadership, which is sort of leaders as facilitators,
Yeah.
Leaders as you know, timekeepers, or you know, making sure that the discussion wasn't going in all sorts of directions. And the more they did that, the less the employees felt that their creative abilities, their creative skills, were put, you know, to good use. That's basically the finding, which is, I guess, contrary to expectations. You know, you would expect the facilitation, the, you know, sketching out the boundaries for the discussion to have a positive influence, but it didn't. And then we got together with Unilever, who, as part of what they call their Partner to Win program, work with a set of preferred suppliers, where the teams no longer are just Unilever, but consist of Unilever plus people from those preferred suppliers. So really teams that operate on the boundary within the supply chain. And what we're interested, again, is to identify boundary conditions that would drive the impact of team creativity climate on creative performance. One of the clearest and possibly clear-cut results was that contractual governance, so trying to capture ownership of ideas, procedures, all sorts of things in contractual agreement, was actually hindering the creative team to be effective. What was, on the contrary, a positive force was what we call relational governance. The level of trust and commitment that exists among the various stakeholders that get together and work in this team, that we could show was clearly driving or boosting rather the impact of team creativity. So when there was a higher level of trust, when there was a higher level of affective and calculative and also a relational commitment, the impact of this, of that certain something, that atmosphere of creativity, would relate in a higher level of creative performance. And ultimately, in this case, we were able to measure, because we basically had one big reference point, Unilever. We were able to measure whether these solutions were beneficial for both the sales target realization of the suppliers as well as the buyers. So basically, and I'd hate to use the term, but it is a win-win situation that's occurring as a result of further integration within the supply chain to develop creative solutions. So, what are the sort of the lessons learned from this programmatic series of studies? One is that we feel it's important now that it becomes fairly easy to measure and to keep tracking, but also recognizing and rewarding creativity within the team, and that teams over time can vary in the in terms of the climate related to creativity. That you can start to pay attention to members' creative skills as well as task abilities, and together with a diversity in functional background can sort of make sure that you have the right mix of people within the team. And sometimes these teams would be 15, 20 people, but in other cases it would just be 5 or 6. That, by the way, didn't really make a difference. That you should lead by not leading too prominently, that self-management when it comes to creativity is an important sort of guiding principle, and this is also something which is a byproduct. We struggled for a long time of how to measure the output of these things, and we came up after running a lot of analysis with 4 dimensions that are listed here: novelty, feasibility, meaningfulness, and specificity of the ideas as creative performance criteria. Again, this is all perceptual. These are all perceptions of higher management that needed to either adopt or reject the ideas. But we felt, or we are feeling confident that this sort of adequately captures something which is called creative performance by teams. And then finally, it's perhaps not or less important to try to standardize or capture everything in contracts. And companies, especially when it concerns inter-company teams, tend to sort of automatically want to do that. Much more important to have the trust and the commitment of the team members towards the project and towards each other. And that then becomes a relational form of governance. So with that, there's a lot of things that we don't know, but there's also a lot of things that we do know. And with those, you can, in any case, start measuring, tracking, monitoring that sort of thing which is called a climate for creativity within teams. With that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much.